This morning, the world awoke to the solemn news that Pope Francis Bergoglio had died at the age of 88. The Vatican confirmed at 7:35 a.m. with the modest walls of his apartment at the Dome of Santa Marta. Within those walls, the Bishop of Rome passed from this life to the next, leaving behind a church transformed and a legacy fiercely debated. According to the official medical certificate, which has just been issued by the Vatican's Directorate of Health and Hygiene, the immediate cause of death was a cerebral stroke, which led to a coma and culminated in irreversible cardiocirculatory collapse. In plainer terms, the Pope suffered a catastrophic stroke, which triggered a final shutdown of his heart and his body. But this final crisis was not sudden. Francis had long suffered from chronic lung disease and had survived surgery in youth that removed part of one lung. In February, he was hospitalized for 38 days because of double pneumonia, a condition which left his respiratory system gravely compromised. The death certificate also listed arterial hypertension, multiple bronchiostasis, and type 2 diabetes, ailments that, while manageable in isolation, proved terminal in combination. The Vatican confirmed that his death was certified by electrocardiographic thanatography, the most precise method of confirming death in a medicalized, monitored environment. So, as was expected some weeks ago, he returned from the Gemelli Hospital to what was effectively a hospice situation where he was under quite intense medical supervision. I suspect his greeting of the pilgrims yesterday was a firm decision that he made in the knowledge that it would probably be one of the last decisions that he was able to take. In some senses, it's sort of a little bit like El Cid and the decision to lead his people to the very end. And the Pope's final day was characteristic, therefore, of his papacy, marked by stubborn devotion to duty. He awoke at 6 a.m. as usual, despite warnings from medical staff to rest. By 7 he was unwell. Just 35 minutes later, he was gone. In defiance of medical advice, he had insisted on participating in Easter celebrations the day before, delivering a final message of peace from his wheelchair to thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square. There, despite visible signs of suffering, laboured breathing, a stiffening arm, and whispered speech. And you will have noticed when he was in the Pope-mobile, one of the priests who was sitting next to him seemed to be massaging his neck. He greeted the faithful one last time. Not content with gestures, he also met with US Vice President J.D. Vance and, previously, about 2 weeks earlier, with King Charles III and Queen Camilla. This was a pope who would not let infirmity eclipse his mission. And the reaction to his death has been global and immediate. King Charles spoke of his compassion and tireless commitment to the causes of all people of faith. Keir Starmer called him a pope for the poor, the downtrodden and the forgotten. Within hours, vigils were held in Buenos Aires and, of course, in Vatican City, where the bells of St. Peter's Basilica have tolled in mournful procession. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, the Camerlengo of the Holy See, delivered the formal announcement. With deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. True to form, even in death, Francis has disrupted tradition. Rather than lie in state beneath the grand crypts of St. Peter's Basilica, he has requested a simpler farewell, an open casket and a resting place at the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. His spiritual testament, written in 2022, asked to be buried in the ground without particular decoration, marked only by the Latin name Franciscus. Francis will be remembered as a pope of paradoxes, progressive yet cautious, radical in tone, but conservative in ecclesial structure. He washed the feet of Muslim refugees but refused to ordain women. He denounced capitalism's cruelties, yet maintained silence over scandals within the Vatican's own financial institutions. On global issues, he was a prophetic voice, calling for climate justice, defending migrants, and imploring, only yesterday, peace in Ukraine and Gaza. He was specific. He used his last day to call Putin and Netanyahu to heel. Yet on matters of such like clerical abuse, many argue his actions didn't match his rhetoric. Francis redefined the image of the papacy, replacing regal pomp with humble gestures, a process which started with John Paul I and has continued to Francis. He was undoubtedly a reformer. I find it interesting and poignant that both the Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent a condolence message calling Francis a consistent defender of the high values of humanism and justice, and Mr. Zelensky, of course, who has met the Pope, said his country was grieving and recalled how the Pope often prayed for peace in Ukraine. There is, of course, a funeral coming very shortly, and that is a time for funeral diplomacy among the elite of almost every nation in the world. And this was an opportunity that we didn't take when the Queen died, and I think we should have taken it to try to bring Ukraine and Russia to some sort of agreement, to try to broker a meeting on the sidelines of a massive funeral, a massive and significant funeral. I hope the lasting legacy of Pope Francis will be peace in Israel and peace in Russia and Ukraine. And there is a small possibility. In Britain, we had I think Putin was the first person to send condolences when the death of Her Majesty the Queen was announced. But it wasn't enough. We need to do more. We need to take advantage of every opportunity to bring Russia and Ukraine to a point where a real discussion can take place. And I hope even if the only people who come to the funeral are the seconds from Russia, Sergei Lavrov and people, that they will at least have the opportunity to speak to President Zelensky, who I imagine will undoubtedly be present at the funeral. I think this is a it was an inevitable moment. It's come much sooner than I think many people expected, and suddenly, particularly given the impression yesterday that the Pope was on the mend.